May 1st, 1945, Führerbunker. 6 children are sleeping in an underground room beneath the ruins of Berlin. In a few hours, they will be dead, not at the hands of the enemy, but at the hands of their own mother. Their father, Joseph Goebbels, had just become the most powerful man in Germany. He would hold that position for less than a day. 18 hours ago, on April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler and his wife, Eva Braun, took their own lives in that same bunker. Their bodies were doused with gasoline and then burned. Adolf Hitler chose a bullet to the head, while Eva Braun chose a cyanide capsule. Goebbels watched as the body of the man to whom he had devoted 12 years went up in flames. The Red Army was close, and he knew that now it was his turn. Paul Joseph Goebbels was born on October 29th, 1897. He was born in Reich, a small textile town near Mönchengladbach in the Rhineland, far from anywhere that mattered. His father, Fritz, worked as an accountant at a textile factory, and he and his wife, Katharina, had 6 children, 2 of whom died at a young age. A modest, though not poor, family lived according to strict Catholic rules. Little Joseph was born the 3rd of 6 children. Little Joseph, he had been suffering from health problems since he was very young. He suffered from osteomyelitis, an inflammation of the bone marrow in his right leg, and shortened it by several centimeters, which permanently deformed it. Because of his disability, the army refused to enlist him in 1914 when World War I broke out and his peers were heading off to the front. For the ambitious young man, this was a profound blow, which he later acknowledged as one of the defining disappointments of his life. While others were earning medals on the battlefield, he stayed home and threw himself into his studies. He attended universities in Bonn, Freiburg, Würzburg, and Munich, before finally earning his doctorate in German Studies and Literature in 1921 at the University of Heidelberg. He hoped to become a writer or a journalist. He wrote novels, plays, and diary entries full of self-pity and intellectual ambition. However, none of his literary works found a publisher. He applied for a job at the Berliner Tageblatt, a prestigious liberal daily newspaper owned by the Jewish Mosse family. Unfortunately, they didn't hire him there either, and in the end, he ended up working as a bank clerk. He hated that job. Goebbels joined the Nazis in 1924, shortly after Hitler was released from prison following a failed coup attempt known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The trial received widespread media coverage and paradoxically helped Hitler. It gave him a platform to present his ideas to the public. One thing in particular caught Goebbels' attention: Hitler's charisma and the firmness of his convictions. He approached Gregor Strasser, the most influential Nazi organizer in northern Germany, asking him to give him a job. Strasser gave him a job. He wrote for his newspaper, did secretarial work, and later became a party speaker as well. This northern wing of the party, centered around Strasser, had a much more socialist outlook than Hitler's group in Munich. Goebbels fit in naturally among them. He advocated the nationalization of industry, admired Lenin, and called himself a German communist. In September 1925, Strasser founded his own group consisting of about a dozen North German party leaders. Hitler did not like this. He saw it as a threat to his authority. In February 1926, he therefore summoned 60 party leaders to a conference in Bamberg. He spoke for nearly 2 hours. He rejected Strasser's more socialist platform and made it clear that in his view, socialism had no place in the party. Goebbels was devastated by this. That day, he wrote just one sentence in his diary, which says it all. "I no longer trust Hitler at all." And yet, a few weeks later, something changed. In the meantime, Goebbels had read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, and realized that he actually agreed with Hitler's view of Marxism. Meanwhile, Hitler made a decisive move. He invited Goebbels and 2 other leaders from the Ruhr region to Munich and sent his personal car to pick them up at the train station. That evening, they spoke together at a rally in a beer hall. The next day, he extended his hand to them in a gesture of reconciliation. That was enough. Goebbels surrendered completely. He wrote in his diary, "I love him, and a few lines later, I bow before a greater political genius." On March 13, 1933, Hitler appointed him Reich Minister for Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. The first step was to take control of the radio. Goebbels ordered the mass production of a cheap radio, the so-called Volksempfänger, which was affordable even for the poorest households. The goal was to ensure that Hitler's speeches reached every German household without exception. The second step was to monitor newspaper coverage, which portrayed Germans as superhuman. Articles and posters glorified the Aryan race as biologically superior, physically perfect, and spiritually pure, the embodiment of all that is noble in human history. These were accompanied by idealized images of fair-haired, blue-eyed farmers and laborers, depicted almost as statues rather than real people. Directly opposite this image stood the Jew, portrayed as a parasite, not metaphorically, but literally, with references to a foreign race that feeds off the host nation, controls its economy, and enslaves its workers. The cartoons accompanying these texts depicted exaggerated noses and a dirty, unkempt appearance. In November 1938, the secretary of the German embassy died in Paris as a result of a gunshot wound. He was shot by 17-year-old Herschel Grinspan. He was a Polish Jew. When the Germans found out, by morning, nearly 200 synagogues had burned down, 7,000 stores had been destroyed, and 90 people were dead. The fire departments had received specific instructions not to intervene to put out the burning synagogues, but only to ensure that the fire did not spread to neighboring Aryan buildings. The men extinguished the flames on one side of the street and let them burn freely on the other. The next day, Goebbels wrote in his diary that the nation was outraged and that this death would cost the Jews dearly. Today, historians refer to that night, Kristallnacht, as the prelude to the Holocaust. A year later, Goebbels was given a task for which he had unwittingly been preparing throughout his entire career: to convince Germany that a war of aggression is, in fact, an act of self-defense. On August 31st, 1939, SS units staged a fake Polish attack on a German radio station in the border town of Gliwice. They changed into Polish uniforms and left the body of a concentration camp prisoner at the scene as evidence. The following morning, September 1st, 1939, Hitler announced in the Reichstag that Polish soldiers had fired on German territory for the first time that night and that Germany would now return fire. At that very hour, German troops crossed the Polish border. Poland fell within 27 days. Later, Denmark fell within 2 hours. Then Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Yugoslavia, and Greece. June 1941, Operation Barbarossa. This was a completely different kind of war. 30 million dead, including 20 million civilians. The Germans committed terrible atrocities. They surrounded entire villages, herded all the inhabitants, regardless of age, into barns or churches, set the buildings on fire, and mowed down anyone who tried to escape with machine guns. Before the invasion, the German press had to refer to the USSR as an ally. After Operation Barbarossa, that stance changed 180 degrees overnight. The invasion was presented as a preemptive strike against a planned Soviet attack. Goebbels ordered that the emphasis be placed on the rapid and easy attainment of victory. On February 2nd, 1943, the German 6th Army surrendered at Stalingrad, the greatest defeat the German army had suffered in the War up to that point. June 6, 1944, Operation Overlord, commonly known as D-Day, Allied forces, the US, Britain, Canada, and others, landed on 5 beaches along the Normandy coast. It was the largest amphibious invasion in history. More than 156,000 soldiers on the first day alone. On May 8, 1945, Germany signed an unconditional surrender. Less than a week after, SS Dr. Helmut Kuntz administered to 6 of Joseph Goebbels' children a morphine injection to make them fall asleep. Their parents were reportedly told that it was a vaccination, the sort that everyone in the bunker had received. Whilst the children were asleep, Magda Goebbels personally placed a cyanide capsule in each of their mouths and crushed it. Shortly afterwards, Joseph and Magda Goebbels also took their own lives.